Always wanted to be a television talk show host. I just never thought I'd ever get a chance because only the rich and famous, the well known, they hold those positions on major networks. So I thought to myself, I may never be famous, may never get any money from it, but somehow I still could fulfill a dream. A dream that would allow me to create a space and a place where people could come together to professionally discuss different topics that are relevant to everyday life. Ordinary people making a difference in the life of someone else, which might actually save a life. And so, here we are, Conversations with Dr. Mike. And welcome. Good evening to everybody tonight. I'm glad that you are able to be with us tonight. And we have a great lineup, great show for you tonight. And we're talking about kings, educating and nurturing the Black and brown males. My first guest tonight, I want to introduce him to you, and he will tell you a little bit about himself. But he is one of our natives here in our state of Louisiana, in our community. And I really wanted to bring him on because his conversation is very, very authentic, is very genuine. Sometimes it is good to hear from people who we ordinarily would not put in on our shows and those types of things. But I like having ordinary people like myself who come on shows and we get a chance to really talk and have some conversation. And so with further ado, I'm going to bring him on because I want to have a conversation with him about his views on some things. So here he is, and welcome to the show, Mr. Daryl Jackson. So let's welcome Daryl to the show tonight.
Hey, how y'all doing?
So wonderful. So Daryl, please tell us a little bit about yourself and to our audience so that they can see you and hear you, share some of your thoughts.
Daryl Jackson, native and resident of Thibodaux, Louisiana, 30 years of age, 2 kids, fiance,
Okay.
regular.
Well, you are a dad who is taking care of his children, and so we appreciate that, Daryl. And we know that in this day and time, that's a huge task, raising children, and so we're glad that you're doing what we know that you enjoy doing, and that's caring about your family, caring about your children. Daryl, I want to talk to you just a minute about what all is going on in America right now. What are your thoughts around the unrest, the racial unrest that is in America, and even when we bring it closer home? What are your thoughts about that?
I'm gonna start off by saying, it is no thoughts. Us as African Americans need to do better at what we're doing as older, because they see the older you are, you really got the excuse me, your youth are watching you. So whatever you do, you gotta make sure it's positive for them or whatever. But with the racial, it's madness. It's madness. It's even down here in Thibodaux, Louisiana.
And so, what do you think that we can combat that or get beyond that point? What is something that you think we need to be doing, working towards harmony and bringing a consensus together?
Voting for one, coming together for two, sticking together for three, and it ain't hard to get along with everybody. I mean, everybody can coexist, and thing things of that nature.
Okay. So when you're saying voting, some people don't feel that it's necessary to vote. They really don't. They don't feel that their vote is going to count, and they don't feel that them going to the polls is going to make a difference. What are your thoughts on that?
And that's the thing. That's how I was feeling at
We
first.
we understand.
But we understand, and we trying to push them to go vote so we can really show them that your vote really do matter. Your voices matter. Everything about you matter.
And so keeping in mind with talking about the things that really matter, you know that the Black Lives Matter um, organization has been marching, and there are multiple chapters of that in various states and cities. Um, what are the Black Lives Matter movement?
Could you repeat your question, Dr. Mike?
What we were talking about the Black Lives Matter movement, and so we know that they are active in various states and in different cities within various states. What are your thoughts about the Black Lives Matter movement as it is today?
All right, well, good evening. Yeah, this is Durham, and I'll take that question right there. Being young black men in today's society or whatnot, we're really dealing, we never really thought that we would be kind of reverting back in a sense, almost like a time warp, like, man, damn. Really 2020 is already a hectic year with the health epidemic with COVID-19 and everything, the world just kind of being messed up. So how we really feeling like we know we're dealing with Jim Crow and everything right now. So that's the beauty of the whole Black Lives Matter collective, you know we really believe in, my mother had a bookstore on Betty Goody by the name of Ujama, and Ujama was one of the principles of Kwanzaa, and that meaning, African American business and Umoja, sticking together and everything like that. So that's what Black Lives Matter represents. A lot of people didn't even have knowledge of the Black Wall Street, taking place in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and the significance, almost a mockery with the leader of the free world that we have elected, actually even, using that site just in that plain of disrespect. So mind you, we're not getting no flack like that, but the dichotomy of being a black man, a urban male in today's society, like I could go to Chili's, or we could go to Chili's. Matter of fact, true story. Very recent, and sit down and not be offered a drink of water or even the chips and salsa. Understanding that we could be, considerate. If you're busy and you're overwhelmed at that point like that, just make the eyes after, we good tippers and everything. Time warp, well said. Yeah, it's like, but damn, it's almost like the Twilight Zone because we got the 21st century problems, but now we really going back. And I like how you bring up the voting or whatnot. A lot of people do feel like, voting doesn't necessarily have any health impact. Daryl and I, we really, that's all we basically have these conversations every day. Right now, at this point, what is it going to take for society to get better? Just on the significance of honoring the people that did fight for the rights to vote. Like we have other associates of ours, like the young guy Jeremy Tays McDowell with the Tigers, Jim McDowell Tyler. Our ancestors would not have appreciated that. They would not have anticipated that. So that's what the Black Lives Matter represents, of having a force, even going to a huddle house or any type of setting like that. And, oh, well, I would have took y'all honor, but y'all looked upset. But that's what voting absolutely has to work on. Honest dialogue has to take place at this point. We don't have an attitude. We're not walking around angst-ridden and antagonistic in nature, nothing like that. Take the time and get to know a man for his character before you judge him. even by his history or the color of his skin. So that's what Black Lives Matter represents, and that's the, you know, that's the importance of voting at this point. Yes, red state, red country, but if you have that conversation, we could reach a new place of cohesion and where all lives could matter at that point. But until we reach that point, we have to focus on Black Lives Matter first and foremost. The Indians were compensated, the Jews were compensated. You know, we have to have this conversation of
So
our,
let me ask you this question. There are some people who feel as though the efforts of those that fought, bled, and died for us to have that right to vote. There are even some Black people who feel that what those people did back then was good back then, but they don't feel that that's applicable or uh, necessary in this day and time. They think that they should go about doing it a different way. How do you feel about the efforts of the and the work that people who died and bled and lived to fight for those of us that are living today, their efforts? How do you feel about what they did then and how applicable is that to you today in this day and time in 2020?
um, with our own local struggle that we're going on with the local police department or whatnot.
With Officer John Sutton,
to be exact,
Jonathan Fry,
Police Department,
T.J. Crochet, Officer Snow, the city, what happened to me last week with the city marshals when they chased me down on a high speed chase and drew guns on me by me being stopped 25, 30 times just for a broken tail light, and
that was said that was properly illuminated and that the tickets were phony.
Right.
So to have this targeting and harassment taking place and fighting this fight on this local level like this, that's why voting is extremely paramount. Mind you, yeah, whoever the president of the United States is, it don't really affect my reality. You know, I have 3 kids. I still have to provide and come up with going to work or any sources of income at that point to take care of my dependents, no matter who's in office. So in my world, there's really no big difference between Joe Biden and Donald Trump on the appeal level, but I can understand, you know, the other side there wanting to go to work. But no, on your local level, that's what's really going, you know, no hard feelings with anyone, but, you know, at a certain times, but just with the frequency and the fed upness of things going on like that, you know, you look for those immediate leaders right there. Like, man, somebody come give me a hand, you know, because it's getting a little hectic at a point where, hey, you know, we don't want to get the foot or the knee to the throat or the rear stranglehold that you got to outlaw. Why you even outlaw the rear stranglehold like that? That should be the least of my concern coming from the police. Like, why there has to be a issue of a law to pay? So we outlawed the stranglehold. So before, you know, those things like that exist, that's why voting should be, you know, taken upon, not only with the sacrifices of our descendants, that should be top priority to deal
And
with.
let me ask you this question about the defunding of the police. What are your thoughts around defunding police?
Derek could go ahead.
I'm gonna say a little something with the police. It's I don't even know how I want to put that word, because every time they see me or they see my truck, they be so belligerent about stopping me. It's like they really
receive a deep-seated stroke of eroticism or attention, like, oh yeah, we got a shot at him, we got a crack at him today, like, Jesus, that almost sounds like a vigilante. So
right
at that point there, you're not the police, you're not protecting and serving me, you're looking to get a hard on every time you get a chance, whether it be something as minuscule and diminutive as the regulations of a doghouse. Like, how many people in dog houses to begin with, let alone to have half the police force respond to the incident, and then you tell a fabrication Oh yeah, the dog bit me. Oh yeah, your dog's buckle. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay, what?
He had told a story and said the dog had bit him when his arm had when he had punched a hole in his arm. We talking about Officer John Sutton.
To be exact,
Punched a hole in his arm.
training.
And he said when we had the live stream with the NAACP with Mr. Pernell Talbot and Mr. Chanel Talbot, he said he had lost judgment of where he was at.
His discretion. But you wasn't too disorientated with your discretion when you take a summons and throw it down on the ground instead of handing it to me in my hand as a man and to properly serve.
And the reason why I had the high speed chase the other day is because they drew their guns on me and threw a subpoena in the car and said, "Here, nigga." And I'm like, huh? I thought I was hallucinating.
But your mind was playing tricks. So
when he did it, it had a lot of people outside. The only reason why the city marshal didn't shoot me is because the white folks on Paris Road saved me. They begged the police not to shoot me. They said he ain't did no wrong.
And and is it so that the marshal is actually running for? Isn't he retiring?
The one that's been in there, he's retired, and he got the upcoming one that's fighting him and Officer Calvin Cooks, chief of police. They're running for city marshal right now.
Right. Certainly, we need to make sure that people get out and vote. I want to thank you so much for your opportunity to be with me tonight, Daryl. I am, and your uncle. Is it Irvin?
Derwin.
Yes, I certainly thank both of you for being with me tonight. And we're out of time for this interview, but I will definitely have you back on the show, and we will definitely be in touch. Thank you so much.
Appreciate your fans, brother.
Thank you. And we're back, folks. Thank you so much for being with me tonight. Please like and share this conversation on your Facebook pages. Please like and share this on your Facebook pages. Send it out to everybody on your page. Tonight, I have two panelists who are going to be with me, and we are going to get down into the nitty-gritty of talking about kings and talking about educating and nurturing Black and brown boys. With me tonight is Dr. Hildebrand Pelzer from Pennsylvania, and he'll introduce and say a little bit more about himself when he comes on. And I also have Dr. Michael A. Armstrong Sr. Of Georgia, and he too will introduce and himself and say a little bit about himself. I just want to say that Dr. Pelzer is a phenomenal author. We are going to talk about his article tonight, which is Failing Black Boys. He also has written a book on unlocking the potential, organizing a school inside a prison. So I want to welcome both of them with me tonight. And say hello to us. I think Dr. Pelzer might be muted. Thank you. So welcome to the discussion, the conversation tonight with Dr. Mike. And if you would just introduce yourselves and say a little bit about yourself, and we'll start with you, Dr. Armstrong.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening, Dr. Mike. I'm Michael Armstrong, 54 years old. I'll be 55 in August. In education, 24 years. In ministry, 30. All my education experience has been in Title I or, majority minority schools. Just real glad to be here on tonight.
Welcome.
Hello, Dr. Mike. How are you? And Dr.
I'm great, thank you.
Armstrong,
Good.
how are you?
Sir.
Let me just correct. I'm not a doctor yet, Mike.
I'm sorry.
I love those titles in front of you, and I'm going to make sure I complete mine as well. But I'm Hildebrand Pelzer III. Thank you for the introduction. From Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Currently live right outside of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Been an educator now for 30 years or so, since the late 80s. As a teacher, assistant principal, assistant regional superintendent here in Philadelphia. Also currently a principal at elementary school. And I'm just glad to be here tonight and look forward to the conversation.
Good, thank you. Well, I just want to know, why do you think in 2020 are we still having these same discussions around race and equity, and why are we still fighting for rights that are supposed to be, according to the U.S. Constitution, given to all mankind? Why are we still having those conversations?
Brother, a system cannot protect those it was never designed to protect in the first place. All right. I mean, from the very founding of this country, when they wrote, the Declaration of Independence in the Constitution, they only saw one demographic as being all men are created equal. We started out as property. Our ancestors started out as property, okay? And then when they had to answer the question, we were only given 3/5 status. And so really when they made these changes over the years, they made sure they wrote loopholes into the stuff just so they could kind of keep the system going. Yeah, we fought the Civil War, to end slavery, but when they wrote the 13th Amendment, you guys have seen the shows and you guys have read the document. They wrote in there, no person shall be held under slavery except as punishment for the commission of a crime for which they've been duly convicted in a court of law. All right, so that little loophole opened the door for Jim Crow and mass incarceration. Well, the civil rights movement in the 60s took out Jim Crow, but it didn't take out the mass incarceration. And then that systemic racism, which has been a part of our existence for literally 401 years, it's the whole fabric on which this society has been based. So until we deal with that, and I mean really deal with it and close off all the loopholes, we're going to have this problem. Let me say this, I'm going to let Dr. Pelzer get in. You guys have, when I grew up, and I would go over to my grandmother's house, I had to, take care of the yard. I had to mow the lawn, and go work in the garden and keep the vegetable patch up. And we had weeds in the yard. And so we had to pull up those weeds. And you guys, if you've ever pulled up a weed, if you don't get that root, then that weed's going to be back next week talking about, I'm back. We never dealt with the root of this issue, which is African Americans or persons of African descent have never in this country been accepted as fully equal. The reason why we're going through the crap we're going right now is because of the spasm of people losing their minds over the fact that we allowed and elected a black man to be in office, and he did a damn good job for 8 years. And so until we deal with this, we're going to keep going through it. And I hope we can deal with it this time.
And I agree 100%. We got to deal with it. Let me just add, Dr. Armstrong spoke eloquently on that. When we look at what's happening right now and the way I'm approaching it, listening to folks say that there is no systemic racism, listening to folks say they don't see color, listening to folks be fragile about this conversation is, to your point, Dr. Mike, why we still had this problem, because this elephant is in the room and no one wants to take a bite at it. And so now is the right opportunity to take a bite at it and try to bite that elephant, kill that elephant, and move it out the room, because there is systemic racism. And when we go as far back as slavery, the fact that folks could not read tells you a systemic racism. And like Dr. Armstrong spoke about Amendment 13, the 13th Amendment, about the abolishment of slavery and its linkage to prison. And for folks, police officers and others, to say that there is no systemic racism, I don't see systemic racism, I don't see color, lets us know that people don't want to have that hard conversation.
So true.
And and that seems to be the issue, that we want to casually go over this hump without making too much out of it, but yet we are still not addressing the matter that is at hand, and that is that we have a national systemic issue around race and equity. And until we deal with that, and until we first admit that we have this issue, then we are going to continue to be fighting the great fight for decades and centuries to come. I know that education is extremely important if we intend to really do anything in life. But given the fact that we have, when you look at our educational system nationally, you have 69% of Blacks that graduate from high school. Then you have 73% of Hispanic, which are our brown boys, and you have 86 and brown people, and then you have 86% who are white that graduate from high school. And when we're looking at the educational system, which we really have to address race and equity if we want to ensure that our kids are really going to get a fair education. When it comes to policies and laws, what are your thoughts and views around the types of policies, the types of laws that need to be enacted in order for change to take place so that we can truly have a educational reform like we need to?
I want to say that I think when it comes to African Americans, we're fighting the war as we have fought every other war on two fronts. One thing that I have noticed, and if we're talking about policy and law, right, I would love to see the same investment in our communities being mandated as opposed to just, being allowed. For example, a predominantly white school district is going to get on average $1,500 more than a predominantly black school district. I'm talking about district. It'll get $150 more per student than a predominantly poor white school district. And so that inequity of distribution of resources is a problem, and it needs to be addressed. That's a policy or a law thing that has to happen, okay? But we have another issue, and it goes back to the systemic racism that we've been dealing with, because I think that soon-to-be Dr. Pelzer would agree with me that when it comes to our children, they have attached a stigma to educated Black children nowadays. It didn't used to be that way. When Dr. King and Booker T. Washington and all them came through, getting good grades in school was seen as the way out of the ghetto, out of the farm, out of the field. And so they were encouraged to do well. But during the time in my career when I was an administrator, I remember having to break up fights between kids. And the reason why these kids got in a fight was not because somebody talked about somebody's mama, or not because they took their lunch money, but because this kid had the audacity to make the honor roll. So now you trying to make me look bad because you acting white. And that's literally what the conversation was. I'm teaching mathematics in a middle school now, and I don't have any issue motivating my Caucasian students to get to it, or my Hispanic children to get after it. But my African American babies be like, I don't know how to do this. Oh. And then I have to come up with ways of getting them to engage. And this is because the culture that we have now calls for us to be trill instead of being real. You got what I'm saying? And so just like your previous guest said that a lot of people don't really believe in the voting system because they think it's rigged against them, a lot of our children are growing up thinking that there's no profit to being educated. it's better for you to be able to rap or carry the strap or shoot the ball rather than to be able to, do the surgery or get in the room to pass the laws that'll benefit all of us. And so we've got to, yes, we have to talk about policy and law, and we can do that. And there's already a lot of books or laws on the books that will take care of that. But we really need to address our cultural issues to get our children back to a place of understanding that education is going to be what gets them out the cage, man.
Now, you have just struck a nerve.
I know I did.
I
want all the smoke. Bring the smoke.
There are going to be so many people out there that are going to say, well, you putting our people down, and well, our children can't get an education, if nobody is going to care about them, but we have forgotten a huge component of the educational process, and that's parents. One of our viewers, Ed Bilbig, is saying that parents need to be involved and instead of only coming to school for sporting events.
And he's exactly right. Excuse me for jumping in there. I'm not saying that I don't care about our children. If you know any of my kids, and when I post this on my Facebook page, all my kids gonna roll out for me because they know that Coach Armstrong is tough on them, but they know that I care about them. And the first thing that we have to do as educators, back me up on this one, Mr. Pelzer, is that we have to, with our kids, I'm talking about with our babies, we got to show them that we care about them. If you don't establish a relationship with these children, they ain't gonna want to hear nothing you got to say. And so, yes, if you establish that relationship with them, you can push their educational levels up as high as you want to. Once my kids know that I love them, they know that I care about them. A lot of them look at me like another uncle or a grandfather, and then I could go up one side and down the other and still help them get their math homework done. All right. So no, I'm not saying that. Let me throw this in. I'm not saying that I don't care, but I am saying it's another hurdle that we have to get across as educators when our kids are going home and all the thing they're hearing on the radio is booty, 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 money, sex, drinking, shooting guns.
So how do we get our parents, Mr. Pelzer, I want you to address that. How do we, because in your article, which, by the way, I'm working on my second book, and I'm using your article as one of those that I'm using in my book. In your article, you say, and you quoted this from the Global Report that was released in 2016, and by the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, noted that the United States has made virtually no improvements in reaching its lowest performing students. So the question then becomes: we know that equity and there is a lack of equity there. We know that, but we also know that our children do, as Dr. Armstrong said, they do come to school. And I'm paraphrasing his words, but they come to school with a culture, right, that is basically saying, well, why do I have to do this? I don't know how to do this. And they'll shut down. But then we reach out to the parents and sometimes we don't get the support. So I know you've written about this. What do we do to engage our parents, especially Black and brown parents, especially Black parents who are dealing with Black boys? How do we get them engaged?
So first of all, I'm going to go back to your question about policy and law. So my answer is not going to be necessarily policy and law, but it's going to piggyback on Dr. Armstrong. And it goes back to instruction, teaching and learning, relationships, caring. So teachers, like Dr. Armstrong, others, see, the equity is right there. The equity is about the person in that room and the type of instruction they're delivering. And how are they delivering that instruction? So what I would like to see, one, is going all the way back even to universities and teacher prep programs, how we're preparing teachers to understand relationships before they get there in schools, how they understand caring, how they understand working with parents, how they understand just working in different environments that they may find themselves in, because the equity is driven right there, the type of instruction that we're putting in front of kids. And so to your point of if our Black kids are coming and saying, I can't do this, I don't want to do this, they're showing apathy to learning, They're scared of learning, and I've seen that over the years. It's teachers who do not accept that, who pull them forward, who expect, who hold them accountable, who bring those parents into the loop with them, into the instructional process, that see success with those children. And so we need more teachers, instructors who have that type of energy and zeal for this kind of work, which is difficult work, right? Challenging work, but can be rewarding and successful work. And so the equity starts with who we hire, who's in front of our kids, type of instruction we're delivering, and those type of things.
So let me ask you this question, because now you've just gotten to a whole different point, which is good, because you know, we have teachers who are frustrated, they are disgusted because they spend a lot of time planning lessons for all children, but it seems to sometimes be that Black children, not all, just some, and in particularly boys, will come to school and will give the teachers all kinds of trouble because they don't want to do the work. I think sometimes they don't want to do the work because sometimes it could be a little bit challenging. That is not to say that they can't do the work. It is to say that perhaps the skill level may not be there to complete a certain task that is a very rigorous task.
Absolutely.
What do you say to those teachers and to those parents who are not holding their kids accountable because they themselves are struggling, trying to keep food on the table and raise the kids, and then you're dealing with teachers who are getting frustrated, saying, you know what, I don't think I'm coming back next year. I can't do this another year. Or they go to the more affluent areas, which we of course know that in the more affluent areas, it's an economic difference. And so white or Black or other, those kids that are going to be in those other schools are typically, quote unquote, going to be, quote unquote, better than the children who we find in the inner city, more structure. So what do you tell those teachers and those parents?
I tell them, don't give up. I tell them, stay the course, stay encouraged. I'm gonna use Dr. Armstrong. Gonna be my man after this. We're gonna go on the road together or something.
Yes, but yes, let's go.
If you pull out the weed, you got to get to the root. That's what he said. And so when students demonstrate or show this apathy or the appearance that they don't want to learn, teachers got to get to the root of the problem. They got to get to the root of what is causing this young person, Black boys in this case, you know, to not want to excel. And that's work. That's conversation. That's relationships. That's work. That's not going to happen in the first few days of school. That might not happen for a while. Okay, but that's the work. And then as it relates to parents, it's instruction again, helping parents, bringing them into the school, not just for back to school nights or other programs or sports and those type of things, but really showing them the aspect of the classroom, the type of curriculum that's happening in the classroom, modeling for them what they could do at home to help their child, to motivate them and build their capacity with the same kind of work, so that you have a school and home partnership going on. So not just being upset with parents because they may seem like they don't care, but you got to teach them too. Sometimes they don't know which questions to ask schools or counselors or teachers. You know, they may ask for the wrong things when you know this is what they should be asking for. So you got to bring them into the loop as well. But you got to get to the root. And so anyone who wants, and I've had teachers who quit because they've had challenges with a few students or 2 or 3 students they couldn't reach. But don't quit. This ain't the work to be quitting on. We can't quit on our young people. Don't quit. And if you feel so inclined to quit, this might not be for you.
Well, I mean, you know, first of all, if a person is aspiring to be an educator nowadays, I'm going to tell them straight up, you need to count the cost. Like, excuse me for getting biblical here, but you need to count the cost, because you're going to be overworked, underpaid, and definitely underappreciated. So if you're going to get into this business, you got to see it for what it is, a ministry of service to children. And you got to be the kind of person where your passion is making a difference in the lives of children. That's what it is. Because see, one of the things that I say all the time, Mr. Pelzer, is we are not in the business of making tires.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you're at the tire factory, you over at the Michelin plant, right? You know the chemistry behind the rubber and the steel that goes in the tire. You know all the mathematics that goes into the formula to make that tire a certain size. And the machines go ahead and put that out. And then you inspect that to see if it came out. But we're dealing with people. We're dealing with kids who have to go home and be the grown-up because they got 2 or 3 other kids and stuff like that. And they got to help. And then they come to school and they got to turn around and be the kid.
That's right.
We're dealing with kids who go home to abusive situations, and when they come to school, that's the only safe place that they got. Mm-hmm. We're dealing with kids who, when they get to school, this is the only time during the whole week they're going to eat. And so they act nice. And they behave themselves for breakfast and lunch. And then as soon as they get back from lunch, it's on.
Right.
You see what I'm saying? And I'm sure you see this. And so as far as teaching is concerned, you got to see that it's not about you, and you've got to be willing to put your love into your lesson plans and into your instruction and into your pedagogy so you can reach these kids. You got to be willing to do the legwork to get to understand the difference between Pookie, Tyrone, and Keisha.
That's right.
Because you might be able to fuss at Pookie and get him to get in line, and then if you do the same thing to Shaniqua, she gonna shut down on you.
Right. I
had a young man, let me put this out there. I had a young man a couple years back. He got in my classroom, and first couple of days of school, he was thugging, and I was talking to him, and I'm like, I'm trying to get to run my class and everything. He said, that's the thing, I don't see you. I mean, just told me point blank to my face. I said, oh, okay. So I called up his mom after, I let him go ahead and have his moment. But then I called his mom, and I asked her to come to sit with him in school the next day, without him knowing that she was coming. Right. And so she did that. And trust me, it was a different tune. Right. Okay. And then it happened to be at a time of the day so that when we dismissed class, I could hold him and her, and we had a come to Jesus meeting right then and there. Right. Now, after that happened, the young man still didn't really change his ways. But what he did was this. When I was teaching my lessons, he didn't disrupt my class anymore, but he would call me over and be like, Coach, did I do this right? You know, he didn't want to be potentially embarrassed by making a mistake in front of all the other people because he had a reputation to protect. Right. And once I figured that out, I adjusted so that he could show me his stuff one-on-one. Right. And it made a big difference in what he ended up doing for the rest of that year. Right. So are we willing? The question is, as educators, are we willing to make the adjustments we need so that we can teach our kids? Now, one of the things that Mr. Pelzer said that I want to piggyback on him, a lot of times when parents get frustrated, it's because they don't understand, all right? These parents, they love their children more than anything. What good parent doesn't love their kids? And so these parents are moving heaven and earth for their children. And a lot of times when there's an issue at school, they want to understand so that they understand that we're doing everything we can to take care of their children. And so when we make ourselves available to the parents and we bring the parents up to speed on everything that's happening, you see what I'm saying? It really goes a long way towards fixing the relationships that allow us to push our children into where they need to be.
Absolutely. Education is a people business. It's a people business. It's kids, it's adults, it's parents, it's the community. It's a people business. It's about relationships.
So do you think that, as one of our viewers said, actually happens to be one of my former teachers when I was a principal, and a phenomenal teacher, might I say at that. And she made the comment about culturally relevant teaching. Sometimes we do not think that because we are perhaps Black and the children that we service are Black, that we don't culturally relevant teaching or professional development, so that we can then implement culturally based and relevant teaching. Do you think that we need to have professional development for teachers and administrators so that they understand the unique needs of their children, because it doesn't matter whether you're black, white, brown, whatever. If you do not identify with the children that you, and I call them scholars, that you're servicing, then you are not going to be successful in building relationships with these children, nor will you be successful in educating. So do you think that we need to start implementing culturally based professional development, sensitivity training for teachers and administrators?
Yeah. So the answer is yes, right? And it may not necessarily be for them to, and it can be to identify, but they got to be aware. They got to know the setting that they work in. It's no need to be coming into schools and not know your community. It's no need to be in front of children and not know your kids and know about them beyond just their name. Know about their background, where they come from. You know, schools now, we're talking about Black children in particular, but my school, we have increasing immigrant and refugee families, multiple languages. So this culturally relevant thing is very serious, to understand the resources you need in your school to support them and to support their parents. And so if you're working in a school where the children do not look like you have to be aware. And it's important that how we demonstrate those professional developments, deliver those professional developments, so that we're following up on those professional developments throughout the year. And we see, as principals and leaders, those professional developments practices being implemented in the classroom. So it has to be some follow-up on that, not just giving them the PD for the sake of giving them the PD, but giving them the PD because we want to see practice and habits and behaviors changing.
I'm not sure that can be addressed as a professional development delivery, simply because what may be happening in my classroom may slightly be different from what's going on with the other. Each teacher has a classroom full of kids, and every single one of those kids has a different story. Now, they may all necessarily be Black, but you got nerds who are Black, you got thugs who are Black, you got jocks who are Black, you got shy kids who are Black, you got cosplayers who are Black, you got emo kids who are Black, you got depressed kids who are Black, you got crazy kids who are Black, and you got to figure that stuff out as you go from class to class. I think if we have our staff development at the beginning of the year, we make it a point to emphasize to our teachers, get to know your clientele. All right. Walmart does this thing. And let me say this, at one point before I became an educator, I worked at Walmart, so I know a little bit about how they do. Walmart makes it a habit to study their customers, to study what it is they like to buy. And then they put that stuff in a place where their customers can get it. You understand what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. If you go and you're trying to buy a can of pork and beans, those can of pork and beans is going to be very close to the where the hot dogs are, because they know that these people shop like that. If you're going to buy a new set of underwear, the underwear aisle is going to be right next to the sock aisle, because they know that, you know, this is what you're going to reach to next, because they know how you think. And so the thing that we want to have a professional development on, if I may so submit, is the kind of professional development where you invest as a teacher in getting in that classroom and getting to know the clientele you got in front of you for right now. Because Mr. Pelzer, I think you might agree with me that we've set up a lesson plan, and one year that lesson plan, we planned for an hour and had the whole lesson taught in 15 minutes. Mm-hmm. And then another lesson we planned for an hour, and an hour into it, we're still past we're at the point where we should have been 5 minutes into the lesson, because we're teaching and the kids are still going, huh?
Right.
All right. And so, again, since we're in a people business, I do believe that you need to take time to invest, to get to understand, yes, culturally relevant teaching, understand what these kids are bringing to the table. Right. And then you tailor what you do to, meet their needs. You're going to see folks, you're going to hear Coach Armstrong rapping about the math in his classroom.
Yeah.
All right. And laying down the bars and stuff like that. You're going to see me when you come in my classroom connecting the Pythagorean theorem to stuff that they normally do outside because they don't see that connection. Right. But once they see themselves in what I'm teaching them, man, then they can fly. So I don't know if it's a professional development thing, but it definitely has to be an investment in relationships.
Right.
So what I'm hearing throughout this conversation, that the consistent thread that keeps being woven through this conversation is around relationships, whether they are teacher-student, whether they are student-student, whether they are teacher-parent. The school and the parent needs to be on the same page, and there needs to be a relationship built between them. One of our viewers, who just happens to be my counselor, now that should tell you something about because I was a very strict principal, but a lot of my followers are my former employees, so I really appreciate them. And here's my counselor who, she's saying that that as a school counselor, that's something that she's tried to do over and over is to emphasize to parents, teachers, and staff about the fact that, you know, we don't know what kids go home to after they leave the school and before they even come to school. So again, that just simply validates the fact that we really need to focus on relationship building. And as a former superintendent, as a former principal at the elementary, middle, and high school as an assistant principal, I always stressed to my administrators, I stressed to my teachers, the first week of school, when you get your rosters, when you know the kids that are transitioning into your building, begin. And in fact, what I would tell principals, the year before that group comes in from the elementary school, if you're the middle school principal or the high school that comes from middle school, go over to your feeder schools and begin to start getting to know those kids so that when they get to you, you're not a stranger. You're somebody who is familiar to them. They don't feel like they're coming into a strange place because you have visited them and they have visited you on numerous occasions. Now, the elementary principal, you have the luxury of getting them when they get to pre-K and kindergarten. Right. So you have the luxury of being able to really and truly nurture and build a foundation for them. But when it comes to the curriculum that is used in a lot of these schools, how do you feel about the curriculum in terms of social justice being added into the curriculum? Now, I know that there will be some teachers who say, you know, and I can imagine, I'm putting on my superintendent hat and my principal hat right now. I can imagine that some of the teachers and some of the administrators who are going to go back in August, keep in mind, we've had a pandemic. And now we have had so much social unrest, racial unrest, that I don't believe that anybody who's a superintendent, who's a principal, who's a teacher, knows what schools are going to look and feel like in the middle of racial and social unrest and a pandemic when they go back in August and September to school. And I really don't know that some teachers who are going to start off are going to finish the race, because it is going to be a whole different mindset, because no longer are you going to be able, whether you're black, white, it doesn't matter. You are not going to be able to go back into those classrooms and half teach or not teach at all. And so when it comes to social justice, what are your thoughts and views around adding that into the curriculum and making these curriculums more relevant, teacher and student friendly, and stop getting away from these curriculums where you're talking to black children and even children that are not black, brown children who live in low income poverty areas. If you're talking about a spread We went to grandmama's house yesterday, and she had a wonderful spread, and we got so full. A spread? What are you talking about? That's what you put on a bed, because that's what. And some of our children don't even know a spread. They know it as a comforter, and
Right.
some of them don't even know that. You put the blanket on the bed. So when you're talking about all of this, so all of this unrest and all of the with the pandemic, what are your views on adding that to the curriculum? And then what are your views on how schools need to address these issues, because we can no longer throw them under the rug? What are your thoughts?
Okay, first of all, when you were interviewing your guest at the beginning of the show, I'm sitting in the little backstage area saying, man, I wish you would have asked me that question, man. I wanted to put my 2 cents in. Come on now. But anyway, let me say a couple of things on this. Number one, I have always approached my classroom in 24 years. I have always approached my classroom from this standpoint. And I told these kids on the very first day, I said, I want you to understand something about Coach Armstrong. One, Coach Armstrong loves you. I'm just meeting you, but I love you. Okay. I respect you. And because I'm coming into this with love and respect for you, you in turn are going to come into this with love and respect for me. I'm not going to call you outside your name. I'm not going to put you down. I will correct your behavior. I will help you learn, but I'm going to do my best to make sure I never make you feel less than. All right. When all of this stuff started, when the pandemic started and everything shut down, and then we're a month and a half, 6 weeks into the pandemic, and George Floyd gets his life stuffed out by a cop who had his hands in his pockets and a look on his face like, who gonna check me, boo? When that started a ball rolling this time that has yet to stop. People are in the streets even tonight. And so when we had a demonstration here in Georgia, where I'm from, and I participated in this demonstration, masked up, socially distanced, of course. When we got to the place where everybody was making their speeches, Dr. Mike, I looked over to my left, and who was standing next to me was my superintendent in my school district. And so there are more people who are, and my superintendent was not a minority. Let me just go ahead and put that on the table. More people are willing to listen and understand now, because since we came up with this, and since we've been bringing this to the fight, the racism, as Will Smith said, is being televised, it's being filmed. And now people can see it going on here the same way it was being filmed in the 60s, and it's creating that empathy that we need. What do we need to do for social justice? I don't care if you teach science, social studies, ELA, math, whatever. The number one rule, treat each other the way that you want to be treated. You got to stop coming in with these preconceived notions. We got to stop having these barbecue Beckys and poolside Patties who automatically assume that a black person is doing something wrong simply because they're in your presence. If all men are created equally, let's treat everybody equal. In the classroom, let's treat everybody equally. Let's be firm but fair. All right. Social justice. If this is the rule for Tyrone, who's the captain of the basketball team, then this is the rule for Morgan, who's the president of the student body. Nobody gets any special favors. Everybody's held to a standard of behavior that promotes and uplifts everybody at the same time with the same potential. You see what I'm saying? We're not cutting corners like Mr. Pelzer said. You better be ready. Because see, one of the things that my school board is wrestling with right now is how we're going to come back in August. Are we going to do it in class and at home on virtual? Are we going to do it all in class? Are we going to do it all virtual? And right now it's looking like it might be a combination. I can't speak for my school board, but it looks like we might have a situation where these kids are doing some days in the classroom with me and other days we Zooming just like we're talking right now. And so, you know,
for just a second, let me stop you for just a second, because I know that I want to talk to the point that you were making, that a lot of people have said, well, I don't like the online learning. And speaking from a superintendent and a principal perspective, what I've said to people is, the safest way to protect our children is virtual learning. Now, am I saying that they should not go to the brick and mortar? No, I'm not saying that. But what I'm saying is, in the midst of this pandemic, we need to be preparing our teachers and administrators, our parents and our students to be enabled to do virtual learning. They might be using Google Classroom, which was one of the platforms that I pushed a lot when I was a superintendent and when I was a principal. But it is so important that we train. The problem was we thrust our teachers into something that, to be honest with you, they should have already been knowing how to do. But that's not a teacher problem. And in some cases, is not necessarily, is it the principal's problem? Sometimes that starts with the head, who is the superintendent. Okay. And so the superintendent is supposed to be educating the board on these issues. And so should they be exposing their administrators to those same type of issues in cases like this. So when people are saying, I don't like that virtual learning, they don't like it because they don't understand it, and I don't blame them. But but now is the time to start training and teaching your teachers and your administrators on that, so that if they have to go to virtual learning, it's not, and the parents and the students, you can create videos that you can put on the website that parents can watch over and over and over and over again, so that they get it and understand. And then perhaps they can have a time when the teacher is available by phone or by Zoom or Skype or whatever, so that they can make them feel comfortable with this. Because as we know, if you're going to give a computer to a child who does not, number one, have internet access at home, again, that necessarily is not the teacher's fault or the principal's fault. It starts with the superintendent, because you need to make sure that your babies have access. You might have to put it on the bus and drive the bus in their community so that they have access to it. Making sure that we have adequate training and professional development and access to understanding how to use technology, because it's a beautiful thing when it's understood. But it is a tremendous crisis when no one understands how to do it. So guess what? The teachers aren't doing it. The kids aren't doing it. The parents aren't doing it. They're griping and complaining because they don't know what to do. Their kids don't know what to do. But if you train them right now, whether we have to go back into brick and mortar, and or, as you were saying, doing a hybrid approach where they're in brick and mortar and they're doing the virtual learning, it is not going to be an issue for our parents. So I wanted to make sure I put that plug in as you were saying that. But I want to go quickly to, and not to cut you off, but I want to go quickly to Dr. Pelzer about the issue of, because you're in a metropolitan area, which is a very more inner city-ish type area in around Philadelphia. And so how would you look at that for your students and your parents, and getting them engaged in all of that?
Right. So a lot is happening. So I don't want to also lose focus of your earlier question too. So over the past 3 months or so, we've had COVID-19, which has forced schools to shift from brick and mortar to remote online learning. I took my school through that. Number of teachers struggled on the front end, got better through every day working with them. So it's possible. There will be a hybrid model going forward. I think the country will look at it that way. But two, we had George Floyd. Awful situation. And then we had civil unrest. So to your question about social justice, one of the things that I did prior to the school year ending was started the conversation about social justice, systemic racism, and just racism in schools. And going back in August, we as a principal and as teachers need to address that in our space. So it's going to be a lot of things going on in the world, in the country, but what can I do in my building? What can I do? What can teachers do in the classroom? So we started that conversation. So I'm looking at social justice as, what are expectations for kids? Are we going to continue to have low expectations? Are we going to continue to have poor student relationships? Are we going to continue to have difficulties with reading instruction? Are we going to continue to discipline kids in such a way that it forces students to exit out of school before they should? You know, that school to prison pipeline type of conversation. So those are the areas that I'm looking at, making certain that I address and hold myself accountable for as my social justice issues, things that I can control, because I'm looking at those things that I can control in my community. My community, my school community is a large community. My school is a large school. The neighborhood is a large neighborhood. And I think that if we do this correctly, we can impact a lot of the social justice and inequities just by looking at what we do in our space, what I do as a leader, what my teachers do, and what I hold them accountable for.
Now I have to get you. It was a great segue right into my next point. And I want to ask this question because, you know, we saw what happened to George Floyd.
Yep.
And I would not wish that on anybody, not even my worst enemy to the 100th power. But one of the things that his little girl said, and it is so impactful, that daddy changed the world.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't care what, you know, people were saying, well, he had a rap. I don't care if he had a rap sheet as long as the Mississippi River multiplied by 1,000,000. That man was an instrument that was used to change America.
Mm-hmm.
The difference between what happened with Rodney King, what happened with some of those other unfortunate incidents in New York and other places, what happened with this is that people, when he cried out
Mm-hmm.
and called his mama
Mm-hmm.
on national, the whole world saw it
Right.
live.
Right.
He literally saw it live.
Right.
That struck a nerve. And the difference between the marching today, and you're absolutely correct, Dr. Armstrong, that people are of all nationalities and races are marching because people are tired. They want freedom, and they truly want freedom. They don't want us to have to wait till we get on the other side to talk about we shall overcome.
Right.
We're seeing it on this side, but yet we're still not overcoming. Year after year, it's the same thing. Murder after murder after murder is the same thing. But the point that I want to drive home here
Mm-hmm.
is two things. How do we, and you've already alluded to this, Dr. Pelzer, that you talked about, you've already started those conversations
Mm-hmm.
about race, because race is a very uncomfortable conversation.
Right.
And it's an elephant
It has to
that does no one likes to talk about.
That's
And
right.
they certainly don't want to eat any of it in a meeting.
Sure.
But now we are going to be, the unconscionable of it all is going to now impact and hit America as it has,
That's right.
like never before. Because not only do you have just Black people, you have people of all nationalities, walks of life, who now want to come to the table of brotherhood and have a conversation about race because they're tired. Now, yes, you still have racist people out there
Mm-hmm.
in all races, but you have so many more who are wanting to have that conversation. But two things here.
Yep.
How do we approach that conversation across racial dynamics?
Mm-hmm.
And number two, how do we stop another child, another man from becoming the next George Floyd?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And what message do we need to send to our parents
Mm-hmm.
who have to be held accountable for how they're raising their children? Give me your thoughts on that before we leave.
Okay, I'm gonna get in trouble again, Dr. Mike. Dr. Mike is telling Dr. Mike that he's about to get in trouble. But I hope that you guys will understand where I'm coming from in this. When I was growing up, one of my aunts, I love my Aunt Julie. She had all these sayings that resonate to me, have resonated with me over these years. And one of the things she used to always say to me was, boy, God don't like ugly. Some of y'all might be able to connect to that, right? And this issue of systemic racism, which has inculcated itself into the fabric of American life for 4 centuries, has been something that God been dealing with for a long time. Mm-hmm. And we have never truly dealt with it. And people can say all they want to, that they don't see color, but when they act a certain way, then it shows that what they're saying is wrong. We can say that all men are created equal, and we can say that we live in the land of the free and the home of the brave, where liberty and justice for all, but we're not doing that liberty and justice for all. And so America is suffering from a cancer where it is collapsing under the weight of its own hypocrisy. And I've been saying that ever since before George Floyd. I got a whole wall of names, from people who have died at the hands of police brutality over the years. And not only that, I got a whole list of testimonials from doctors who other doctors were questioning whether they got their credentials the right way. And my military classmates from West Point when I went to school, and some of the stories that they've had, it's been a problem and it has to be addressed. Now, one of the things that I kind of struck me as ironic was how the COVID hit and shut everything down and brought everything to a standstill. And then right after that, here comes Ahmaud Arbery, and then George Floyd, and then Breonna Taylor in rapid succession. Mm-hmm. And the thought that came to my mind as I meditated on this is, if you're going to do surgery on a patient, you got to immobilize them first. And so the COVID, if I can suggest, it just in the crazy coincidence of things, the COVID was a way of making the country stop. All right. And then the racism came to the forefront, and it came to the forefront the same way if you got to cut that cancer patient open to get to that tumor, it's going, the reason why we have to anesthetize the patient is because it's going to be painful. And when you cut that patient open and you look at that tumor is going to be ugly. And so it's going to be painful and it's going to be ugly. The problem that we have now is that there is no anesthesia for this conversation. We've got to have this conversation, because unless we don't, we're going to continue to treat a whole demographic of our society like they're second-class citizens, and they're just not going to put up with it any longer. And the whole world is seeing the inequities that are being treated to these people. And as long as people have blood in their bodies and breath in their lungs, they're going to want to be treated like everybody else. And so it's time, Doc. It's time. And we ain't got to be, it's not on us to make you comfortable. I ain't got no anesthesia for you. You're going to have to deal with the fact that there are people, maybe not you, but there may be people who feel this way, and you're seeing them too. Don't talk to me about not bringing this issue up. Go talk to that Ken and that Karen who had the rifles and guns pointed at the peaceful protesters while they were going along. Go talk to the people who didn't say anything to the protesters with the guns who were standing on the Michigan State Capitol, talking about we want to go to, Wendy's and Applebee's and get our bloomin' onion. But then you're going to turn around and shoot rubber bullets at black people holding up cardboard signs. When you see that kind of stuff, it's time for us to have a conversation. And I got to stop, but I'm going to say this and I stop. If we don't deal with this, America is going to collapse under the weight of her own hypocrisy. That's just what's going to happen. Yeah.
And Dr. Mike, if I could add.
Yes.
Any leader walking around right now that does not think they're not going to have this conversation has their head in the sand. Because this conversation is going to happen. It's not only in schools, but organizations, corporations, NASCAR, you name it, it's going to happen. And it has to happen in your space. And so somebody asked me the other day about when children return to school, how are we going to have this conversation with them and our readiness for their questions. That's a legitimate question. But what I responded to was, how are folks going to be ready for me? Because I'm ticked off. Right, like that killing of George Floyd, the murder of George Floyd, listen, I'm ticked off. You know, I try to measure myself. I try to, you know, go about managing that anger and frustration. But that's why I had the conversation with my staff before the school year ended. But trust me, going back to school, listen, I'm looking for all the inequities. I'm looking for all things that I can disrupt in such a way to make my school better and make kids' lives, particularly Black children's lives, better. So anybody who thinks they're not going to have this conversation and hit it head on, they got a problem.
So
James Baldwin said, to be a Negro in America is to be in a perpetual state of rage most of the time. Frederick Douglass said, I love my country more than anything else. And because I love her, I reserve the right to criticize her as necessary. This is that moment. And my brother earlier in the show had talked about how a lot of his peers don't see the necessity of voting. And to that, I was like, you brought up the point, Dr. Mike, about how our ancestors bled and died and hung from trees and stuff like that to give us this opportunity. If you don't vote, you're insulting people who gave up their lives so that you would have the chance to vote. And voting right now is one of the ways that we can definitely make a statement about who we are as Americans. And so I know that this show is being watched by a lot of people, at least I hope it is. And one of the things I'm saying is, if you have never voted before and you want to see this situation dealt with, now's your opportunity. And not only that, I'm not just saying who to vote for, but I'm saying you need to talk to these people who are running for office, and you need to ask them, like Charlemagne the God asked Joe Biden, what are you going to do? Not what you're promising to do, not what you're telling me you're going to do. What are you going to do for my community? All right. And hold them to that. Once they get in office, you said you're going to do this. Now, if you're not going to do it, I'm going to go back and vote again. And I'm going to move you out and put somebody in there who's going to work for me. And that's how we get this ball rolling and get this conversation started. So you better make sure you register to vote and participate.
Absolutely. Well, folks, listen, this conversation is getting hot and heavy right now. And so, stay tuned. Because tomorrow we come back and we finish this conversation about kings educating and nurturing Black and brown boys. And let me tell you something. I already know that tomorrow it's going to be steaming. I want to thank my guests tonight for being with me. I am so excited and thankful to both of you, Dr. Armstrong and, oh my goodness, Dr. Pelzer.
Go ahead and call him Dr. Pelzer. Go ahead and call those things that be not.
I'm extremely excited to have you on because I know that both of you are very busy, but I know you're a hard man to catch up with. So I appreciate both of you giving me and my viewers just a little bit of time. Again, please like and share this. Share it on your Facebook pages. We're also live streaming from YouTube and also Twitter. So tomorrow night, we return back here again, 7:30 Central Standard Time, 8:30 Eastern Standard Time. And I want to thank you again for being on the show. And folks, don't change that dial. Catch us on tomorrow. And remember that, hey, make a difference in the life of someone because it very well might just save a life. Have a good night, folks. Thank you.